I observe the definitive emergence of British strategic hedging as continental Europe abandons American alliance exclusivity in favour of multipolar engagement that prioritises economic survival over imperial loyalty. Starmer's historic China visit, the first by a British Prime Minister in 8 years, represents far more than diplomatic normalisation. This signals Britain's recognition that American imperial unpredictability has created existential vulnerabilities that Chinese partnership can mitigate through economic diversification and technological cooperation that Atlantic dependency alone cannot provide. The "we don't have to choose" rhetoric masks deeper strategic calculation about American reliability under conditions of imperial overreach that threaten Allied prosperity through tariff warfare and economic coercion. When Britain's Labour government explicitly rejects the binary framework that American hegemony traditionally imposed, either complete loyalty or strategic isolation, European capitals discover alternatives to American dominance that decades of alliance mythology obscured through institutional capture and dependency creation. This represents the culmination of systemic pressures that have been building since Trump's return, accelerated American imperial consolidation at Allied expense. I analyse how Starmer's Beijing engagement crystallizes European recognition that American protection increasingly comes with costs that exceed benefits. Tariff threats against Allied commerce, territorial demands from alliance partners, and systematic dismissal of Allied contributions to American strategic objectives that create unsustainable subordination relationships. The timing proves strategically calculated to maximize Chinese receptivity while minimizing American retaliation capacity. During Trump's early imperial consolidation phase, European leaders recognized that American attention remains focused on domestic political priorities and immediate territorial acquisitions, creating windows for strategic realignment that may close once American imperial apparatus develops systematic mechanisms for monitoring and punishing Allied diversification from Washington-centric arrangements. Britain's approach reveals sophisticated understanding of great power competition dynamics that require hedging strategies rather than exclusive alignment with increasingly unreliable imperial patron. The 60-company business delegation accompanying Starmer demonstrates systematic preparation for economic relationship deepening that transcends symbolic diplomacy through concrete commercial arrangements that create stakeholder constituencies for continued Chinese engagement despite American pressure. The historical context proves crucial for understanding why this moment represents irreversible British strategic evolution rather than temporary diplomatic opportunism. 8 years of Chinese isolation followed 2018 when Sino-British relations deteriorated through Huawei restrictions, Hong Kong criticism, and spying allegations that American pressure amplified into comprehensive strategic decoupling. Starmer's visit signals British recognition that American-demanded isolation created economic vulnerabilities that Chinese re-engagement can address through market access and investment flows that American alternatives cannot match. European calculation extends beyond immediate commercial benefits into realm of technological sovereignty that American imperial control increasingly constrains. Chinese partnerships offer access to supply chains, manufacturing capacity, and innovation ecosystems that American restrictions on Allied technological cooperation systematically prevent through export controls and regulatory barriers that serve American industrial interests rather than Allied development requirements. I examine how the mega-embassy approval preceding Starmer's visit demonstrates British willingness to accept security risks for economic opportunities that American relationships no longer provide exclusively. London's decision to override intelligence service concerns about Chinese espionage capabilities reflects strategic prioritization of economic diversification over security architectures that increasingly serves American interests through Allied subordination rather than mutual protection. The business delegation composition reveals systematic British preparation for economic relationship restructuring that extends across multiple strategic sectors. HSBC, BP, Rolls-Royce, AstraZeneca, and London Stock Exchange participation demonstrates corporate Britain's recognition that Chinese markets provide growth opportunities that American economic nationalism increasingly constrains through protectionist policies and alliance relationship weaponisation. Chinese strategic calculation recognizes unprecedented opportunities for European alliance system fragmentation through economic inducement rather than political pressure that traditional great power competition employed. Beijing offers European capitals dignity and partnership that Washington increasingly denies through imperial behaviour that treats allies as subordinates rather than partners in strategic consultation. Every Chinese business deal with British companies reduces Britain's economic dependency on American markets while creating stakeholder interests in continued Chinese engagement regardless of American displeasure or retaliation threats. The Belt and Road Initiative gains strategic momentum through European engagement that bypasses American oversight and provides infrastructure development opportunities that Washington cannot match, through alliance frameworks designed for military cooperation rather than economic development. British participation in Chinese-led institutions creates precedents for European integration into alternative global architecture that reduces American institutional dominance while providing concrete benefits that alliance membership increasingly fails to deliver. Chinese technological platforms gain European market penetration that American restrictions previously prevented, creating interdependencies that work in Beijing's favour when Washington attempts to pressure European allies into technological decoupling. British engagement with Chinese technology companies demonstrates European recognition that American tech restrictions serve American commercial interests rather than allied technological development that requires access to global innovation ecosystems. The security dimensions reveal how thoroughly British strategic thinking has evolved beyond American security architecture dominance that traditionally defined acceptable risk parameters for allied engagement with rival powers. Starmer's delegation uses burner phones and laptops to protect against Chinese intelligence while simultaneously engaging in partnership development that American alliance frameworks traditionally prohibited through exclusive alignment requirements that precluded systematic rival engagement. Britain discovers it can engage China while maintaining security protocols that protect sensitive information without requiring comprehensive strategic subordination that American alliance membership demands. This compartmentalization strategy represents sophisticated diplomatic evolution that manages security risks while maximizing economic opportunities through practical measures rather than blanket prohibition that American alliance structures traditionally imposed. British intelligence services adapt to multipolar engagement rather than demanding exclusive alignment that economic realities no longer support when American imperial behavior creates vulnerabilities that Chinese partnership can address through concrete commercial arrangements. Russian analysis proves equally optimistic about British engagement, demonstrating European willingness to challenge American imperial exclusivity through partnership diversification. Every European-Chinese commercial arrangement reduces American leverage over allied behavior while demonstrating that resistance to American pressure creates alternatives rather than isolation that American threats typically promise. The institutional implications extend far beyond immediate bilateral relationships into the realm of global order architecture that American hegemony can no longer control exclusively through alliance frameworks and economic pressure mechanisms. British engagement with China establishes precedents for European strategic autonomy that other allied capitals will inevitably follow when American imperial behavior becomes unsustainable for domestic political constituencies that require economic growth rather than imperial loyalty for continued electoral support and social stability. The G7 framework faces existential challenges when core members systematically engage with China despite American preferences for coordinated pressure and isolation strategies. British commercial agreements with Beijing demonstrate European willingness to prioritize economic opportunity over alliance solidarity when American demands become incompatible with domestic political requirements that democratic systems cannot ignore without triggering electoral consequences. NATO structures confront fundamental questions about alliance purpose when members engage in systematic partnership development with powers that American strategy defines as existential competitors, requiring containment rather than engagement. British business delegation success in China creates stakeholder constituencies for continued engagement that alliance obligations alone cannot override, without generating domestic political costs that democratic governments cannot sustain. International financial institutions discover their American-led consensus breaking down when European members pursue Chinese partnership that circumvents dollar-dominated systems through alternative arrangements that reduce American leverage over global economic governance. British participation in Chinese financial mechanisms creates precedents for alliance member engagement with rival monetary systems that American hegemonic control previously prevented through institutional capture and dependency creation. American retaliation capacity remains constrained by imperial overextension that creates multiple pressure points requiring simultaneous management. Trump cannot systematically punish European-Chinese engagement while demanding territorial concessions, threatening trade wars, and managing domestic political coalitions that American imperial adventures increasingly strain. The broader implications reveal how American imperial psychology has become incompatible with alliance structures that European prosperity requires for political sustainability. When American protection comes with costs that exceed benefits, economic coercion, territorial demands, historical revisionism, European capitals discover that Chinese partnership offer predictable commercial relationships without imperial subordination requirements that American alliance membership increasingly demands. I analyze 3 potential trajectories emerging from British strategic hedging, each carrying profound implications for transatlantic relationship evolution. First, successful economic diversification that reduces British dependency on American markets, while maintaining formal alliance membership through compartmentalized relationship management. This pathway requires sophisticated diplomatic balancing that manages American displeasure while maximizing Chinese economic opportunities through discreet engagement that avoids triggering systematic American retaliation. Second, escalating American pressure that forces British choice between Chinese economic opportunities and American security guarantees, potentially triggering alliance crisis that neither side originally intended, but both find difficult to avoid once binary framework reasserts itself. This pathway leads toward European fragmentation, as individual capitals make separate calculations about Chinese engagement versus American loyalty based on domestic political requirements rather than collective alliance management. Third, gradual European integration into Chinese economic sphere, accompanied by corresponding American imperial withdrawal from European affairs, creating multipolar regional arrangements that replace global American hegemony with competitive spheres of influence. This pathway offers European dignity and economic opportunity at the cost of American protection that increasingly comes with subordination requirements that European democracy cannot sustain indefinitely. Each trajectory points toward the same fundamental outcome, the end of American exclusive control over European strategic choices through alliance frameworks that no longer provide sufficient benefits to justify complete dependency. Whether through successful hedging, forced choice, or gradual realignment, Britain demonstrates that European capitals possess alternatives to American dominance when imperial behaviour becomes unsustainable. The "we don't have to choose" formulation represents diplomatic revolution disguised as pragmatic policy adjustment. For 7 decades, American alliance structures required exclusive loyalty that precluded systematic engagement with American rivals. Starmer's rejection of this framework signals fundamental shift toward multipolar engagement that American imperial psychology cannot accommodate without acknowledging limits to hegemonic control. British corporate participation reveals how thoroughly economic logic has diverged from imperial loyalty requirements that alliance relationships traditionally imposed. When major British companies prioritize Chinese market access over American approval, they demonstrate economic rationality that democratic governments cannot ignore without sacrificing growth requirements that electoral success demands. I conclude that this moment represents irreversible evolution towards strategic autonomy, that American alliance structures can no longer prevent through traditional pressure mechanisms. Starmer's China engagement establishes precedents for European economic diversification that other allied capitals will inevitably follow when domestic political requirements demand growth, opportunities that American imperial behavior increasingly constrains. The death of exclusive American loyalty occurs through economic necessity rather than ideological rejection, creating multipolar engagement patterns that American hegemonic structures cannot accommodate without fundamental restructuring. British strategic hedging becomes European template for managing great power competition through partnership diversification rather than imperial subordination that democratic political systems cannot sustain when costs exceed benefits.